Welcome back. We are going to look at the first concept of our lesson for today, which is ecosystems definition. Ecosystems are specific environments where living organisms interact with one another and with their physical environment. So we've already explained this in the previous activity that we just did, that ecosystem comprises of an environment or is an environment that allows living organisms to interact with one another and also with their physical environment. So that is an ecosystem. Plants and animals in the ecosystem depend on each other to survive. So animals in an ecosystem will depend on the plants for nutrition, and then other animals will depend on the plants and also on the other animals for nutrition. So most of the time we find different ecosystems in the planet or in the biosphere, if I can put it like that. So together, all these ecosystems make up the Earth's biosphere. An ecosystem consists of a biotic, which is non-living, environment, and abiotic, which is living organisms. So that is what an ecosystem consists of. It consists of living factors and also non-living factors. So try not to confuse the definition of an ecology and also ecosystem. If you remember, ecology speaks about the study of interactions, while the ecosystem speaks of the environment where the interactions take place. So we are going to move on to the next concept of our lesson, which is biotic and abiotic factors. Starting with the biotic factors, explanation, and example. So the prefix bio here means life. Therefore, the term biotic means pertaining to life or relating to life. So in short, biotic factors means living things. So everything that is able to undergo life processes in an ecosystem is referred to as biotic factors. Biotic factors refer to all the living organisms in the ecosystems, like I've just alluded. Some examples of biotic factors include animals, plants, and microorganisms. If you remember, microorganisms cannot be seen with our naked eyes because they are microscopic. As a result, in most of the pictures that we are going to look at now, we will not be able to identify them with our naked eyes. This is a picture that shows an example of biotic factors in an ecosystem, but not microorganisms since they are microscopic. So here is our beautiful picture that has a combination of biotic and abiotic. But in this instance, we are only going to identify the biotic factors. So the first thing that you can see in that picture is we have a tree here, we have a nice giraffe here, we have elephants there, we have grass. So these are all the living factors that we are finding in this ecosystem. Now we are going to move on to our abiotic factors. The prefix a before the word abiotic means not living. So biotic, living, abiotic, not living. Abiotic factors means non-living things. So now we are looking at the things that cannot undergo life processes in the ecosystem. And abiotic factors refer to all non-living things in an ecosystem. Some examples of abiotic factors in an ecosystem include, we have water, air, sunlight, soil, including rocks. So those are the examples of things that are not living or are non-living or are abiotic in the ecosystem. Sorry, let's just quickly fix that. Right, so just a quick reminder, do not confuse abiotic with biotic. So biotic means living, abiotic means not living. Here's a picture that shows an example of abiotic factors in an ecosystem. So if you remember, from the previous picture, we saw an ecosystem that had both living and non-living organisms, but we only identified the living. So this time we are going to identify only the non-living or the abiotic factors. So the first one that we come across there is sunlight. We can see there's a beautiful sun over here, which gives us sunlight. And then the second one is the air or the atmosphere. And then we have the soil down here. Then we have water. So these are the examples of the non-living factors or the abiotic factors in our ecosystem. Right. Moving on to our third concept of this lesson. So we are going to look at the size of an ecosystem. The size of an ecosystem is not specifically defined. It is not defined in terms of area, but rather in the interactions that occur inside it. So ecosystem size is not defined by how big the space is, but it's defined by how many organisms interact with one another. That is what we are explaining there. So therefore, ecosystems are defined by the network of interactions among the organisms and between the organisms and their environment. So that is how we decide whether an ecosystem is big or small, by looking at how many interactions are happening between organisms and also between the organisms and their environment. Now lastly, ecosystems have no particular size. They can be as small as a tree. A tree can be an ecosystem because we can have different organisms occupying the tree or using the tree as their habitat, or they can be as large as a forest. So basically, you cannot define the size of an ecosystem in that regard. So we are going to leave it here for now, and I'll see you after the ad break.